All right, we are back. It has been about a year and a half since we have done this, but we are in a new space. We have cameras. If you're watching this on YouTube, hello, I'm Mark. I'm
What's up, what's
one of the
up?
worship leaders here at Eden. I am here with Pastor Daniel Atondo.
Yep.
It is good to be back.
Yeah, it's been over a year and a half since we last did a podcast, and roughly?
Yeah, I was going through it last night, and the last one we did was after we went to Florida
Yeah.
in June 2019, which feels like a lifetime ago because things are so different now.
Yeah, and the thing is that COVID does not explain why there was still an 8-month gap between when we did our last podcast and the COVID stuff. So why did that podcast die, Mark, is the question that I want to know.
I feel like it was ahead of its time.
We were too far ahead of our time.
But I also think that there wasn't much for us to really talk about, and I just feel like in the conversations that we have had between now and then, like I definitely feel like if we had just recorded those, that would have been a great podcast episode. But we are back.
Yeah.
Like we're doing this. I think a lot of people started podcasts over the last year, but we are going to leverage this time that we have, all the equipment that we were able to gather over the last almost year to help provide more content for people, because I know that right now we're putting out service once a week, and I feel like we could also be doing more because we have all this,
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that was kind of the vision behind why we even wanted to do this. Now, we did kind of jump into this with not a lot of questions being answered in terms of like the direction of where we're going, but I think the heart of this was to bring everyone who considers Eden Church home, or anyone else who's just interested in the types of conversations that we're going to have. But the purpose was to keep the conversation going, because we feel like we can communicate through email, we do some social media stuff, and then we have Sunday morning communication. But beyond that, we don't have a lot of dialogue going on between us and the church and filling in some of the gaps for people. And so we felt like, at least in part, this was an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that blows my mind is that there are still people who have been watching for months even, who have not even gotten to meet you in person. I mean, like we do like the Zoom call once a month, or we're trying to do it once a month, but it's just so weird that like there's people who haven't gotten to know you or haven't gotten to know me, and so I think this is also a great opportunity to hear you outside of your message every week for the 25-30 minutes that you get.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I love that thought because, it's crazy. From time to time, like we'll do some, like we did the Joy Boxes, and there we met a handful of people that have been at Eden, but have never actually been into like an Eden service. And then I think we had a Zoom call with someone who joined the volunteer team, but they have never actually been a part of an in-person Eden service.
Yeah.
And so this has been such a crazy type of year, but because of that, it has kind of pushed us to do things as a church that we probably would have not done for a few more years. Like the fact that we've been an all digital church, whether it's through groups or service, and then now even pushing us toward being more intentional about developing YouTube content.
Yeah, I remember December 2018, because back when we were in person, back in the olden days, we would take like the last Sunday of the year off to give us like a Sabbath as a team.
Yeah.
And so I remember we were throwing around the idea of producing like an online service.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with one of the media directors at another church, and they were kind of running through what they did for theirs. And and they gave me like a list of equipment. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is way out of out of my comfort zone even. But if I take a step back, like this is what we've done for the last 9-10 months now. So it's like, it's crazy that, something that I thought was so out of our comfort zone is now just our normal.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like we all know that anyways. Like when things are hard, that's oftentimes when like the most growth is associated with like our development. But I felt like this year was so unique where, we say that about our organization, but I imagine that is true of every organization they've had to pivot. They've had to rethink their strategy or their philosophy of operating. And so, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's really cool. And so anyways, I mean, we're going to be jumping onto this podcast. The hope is that we get to interact with you. And so we really don't want this to be like a one-way deal where you're just viewing it. It would be really helpful for us if even in the comment section of this video, if you throw out some ideas on like what are conversations that we haven't been having at Eden that you would want us to delve into and talk about in a more informal environment.
Yeah. And for you audio only listeners, you can message us on social media. Our handle is @EdenTheChurch, or you can email us at hello@eden.church. So feel free. Our DMs are open. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your feedback. Give us ideas to talk about. We're definitely going to try to bring some of our friends on here too, because we also want to have other people's perspectives and hear their voices as well. So it's not just going to be me and Daniel, but I do think that it's an awesome platform that we get to use because we already have podcast. Like we upload our messages every week. We have our YouTube channel. So I think it's a great way for us to leverage that.
Yeah, 100%. No, I'm really excited about it. And then I feel like even just for this first podcast, part of it was, I feel like part of it is just inviting people into the journey, because we don't really know where this is going to end up or where we're going to land in terms of the podcast. But I think that has kind of been some of what we've been learning in this season, is that like you just got to get in there and try it and run through a few sessions of it, get a few under your belt. And then I think over time we'll have a little bit more clarity. But I kind of like, it's kind of like Seinfeld. Seinfeld was a show about nothing. Mm-hmm. What is our Mark, do we even have a name for this podcast?
I mean, right now I think it's just the Eden Podcast. But if you have any ideas, comment below,
clever
send us a DM.
Yeah, if you have a clever name for the podcast. But for right now, we ain't about the labels.
Yeah, that's true.
We ain't about no labels right now.
But we are already, taking a step by putting this out here. So
that's true.
I don't know. I'm not great at naming things anyway, but if anyone has any great ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Well, I mean, Mark, if you think about, all that has happened over this last year, and then even what is like starting to seep into 2021, what do you feel like was maybe the thing that you were most happy, like the thing that you walked away feeling like, obviously none of us would have wished this would have happened, but on the back end of all that has happened, what are you grateful for?
Yeah, I think one big thing that I think one big theme for not just me, but for a lot of people is just change, right? I think in 2019, one of the things that I really went through a lot was like a lot of deconstruction of my faith and just a lot of different things about myself that I was learning. And I think this past year, I've just had to be okay with change, whether that is outside of my control or not. I think that I am naturally a risk-adverse person, and I also like being comfortable. And I also, once I find something that I like, I just kind of latch onto that. So obviously, the past year, there's been a lot of things where the things that I'm comfortable with or the things that I like, I can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And so if it weren't for that, I probably would not have done that. So
yeah.
I think that that's been one of those things, and it's made me step out of my comfort zone, and it's made me try new things that I probably would not have done.
Yeah.
And obviously too, that's coming from a place of knowing that I have, that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And knowing that I will be safe, like in terms of like job security, or knowing that I'm going to have a roof over my head. So I think that like, in a way, it is coming from a very like comfortable and privileged spot to just say like, a lot of things changed, but it's okay. But in a way, like I think it has made me confront that part of me that is like risk adverse or like wanting to stay in what's comfortable, because a lot of what was comfortable is not viable still, know. So how about you?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I think, I think this year just forced all of us to reflect on like just to gain a greater sense of self-awareness, because there were so many things that I think were probably always true of our culture, but we just had maybe never had to face it or to think about it. And I think this year there were so many things that like we had to revisit from a fresh perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And even for us, I mean, we're a young church. This is the first time you've ever been like a lead worship music director, whatever we call, your position. And the same for me. Like, this is the first time that I've ever been in a role like this. And so I feel like in some sense it was the challenge of it was refreshing to like our faith. Like I felt like we just had to every week kind of figure things out. And I just imagine that like that is true for everyone. And I think it's still true for everyone. Like, I don't know anyone who's gotten into like a rhythm where it's like, okay, yeah, this is kind of my system now, or at least, people with young children. Because for Kayla and I, we are every week like pivoting, making a plan, revisiting the plan, rebuilding the plan. And so it's just a constant flow. But like you said, I mean, I think we're getting more comfortable with not knowing, like more comfortable in the mystery and the uncertainty of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, I feel that.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, obviously, like you can't prepare for this, but I do think in some ways I am grateful that we were a pop-up church.
Yeah.
Because in some ways I think like that grit and that tenacity that comes from being on a team where like not every week something's going wrong, but like you have to be ready to like pivot and you have to be ready to like move to a different location if the location that you're meeting at says you can't meet there anymore. I think like in that way where we're not tied down to like a location, I think that helped a lot. Yeah. Because we already kind of had a mindset of like nothing is permanent already. So I think being able to just pack up and wherever it is we need to film, like, and obviously right now, like we're filming, like we've been filming service in here for the last 6 months, almost 7 months now. And so we've been really blessed to have some sense of permanency. But I also think that mindset of just being willing to like, pack everything up and go wherever we need to go is also really important. And I think that gets developed when you have that type of culture where that's just what's kind of the norm.
No, that is so good. And I think like that, so much of that was like revealed, like your true character of your people, but also of organizations, like the culture of an organization. When it's under pressure and stress, it starts to like reveal the true personality, the true character. And so I felt like I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, but I was very grateful and thankful how flexible our team continued to be week after week after week. When we didn't know where we were going to be able to film, I mean, we had to keep finding and, searching out locations, calling, searching, where could we start filming and sort of setting up a base of operation. For a long time, we didn't have that. Yeah. And so I don't know, I felt like very, very grateful for that. But we talked about this before. I'm like, I feel like we're in a very agreeable stage on our team. And so at some point, I'm sure that will shake. And like for people, like one of the ways that we have really tried to organize, like even our team, is like high feedback culture. Yeah. Not getting your feelings hurt if you have an idea that someone doesn't, run with or something like that. And so just being able to do that. But I feel like we are, we're all kind of running on the same cylinder right now. And that's a gift for this season, I think.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think like and I think that's part of that, where it's like we don't have the luxury of being like, even when we were meeting in person regularly, like there was still a lot of things where stuff, like at least from my perspective, as a lot of my stuff is a lot of Sunday morning stuff where it's like something's not working and you have to, try to troubleshoot that. It's kind of like you don't have the time to really complain and get upset. And so I feel like a lot of that translates over. I remember especially like back in the beginning of when we started doing church online. So March, April, May, when we probably doubled our meeting locations because of we've met in like 3 or 4 different places just to film. And so, and a lot of those weren't even that permanent because we've been in here since June.
That's true.
So we did, we did church online starting in March. So if that's 5 locations and one of those locations we've been in for a while, like we were jumping around for a bit. So it's, and I think it's kind of the same principle where it's like, we don't really have the time to complain about stuff because we have stuff to do.
Yeah.
We still have a mission and a vision to keep running after. So
Yep. No, 100%. And not even just like our team, even though, I mean, I'm talking about like our staff team, but like our volunteer crew and like the people who just kept showing up and kept being involved and stepped into, hosting online service. They've never done that either.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
true.
I felt like as much as we were challenged, we were calling other people to, step up into those environments and to challenge themselves. And I just think, obviously this is a challenging year, but at the same time, what a gift this year was in terms of, and again, I realized too that is a privileged thing to say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't easy. We didn't want this, but we can see how God was with us in it and through it, and how He's forming the culture of our church. Yeah. I mean, if there's ever time to start a church and to be young and to have this a part of your culture, I mean, I think in the long run, it's a gift.
Yeah. And I mean, it is that pressure, right? Like, I think it's kind of like being refined because but at the same time too, I think we're just so blessed in the position that we were in because we weren't just getting started.
Yeah.
Like, I think
that's true.
Also in a place where we felt comfortable putting on a service. So I think it would have been one thing if we were still trying to figure that part out.
Yeah,
too.
That's true.
But I think that we were really blessed that we were still able to get those reps of in-person service under our belt, because I could not imagine trying to start anything from scratch right now like that.
Yeah.
But
well, I wonder, Mark, because I mean, even just to like the people who are watching this, for them to like, because I just think processing your life is part of how you start connecting to the dots. It's part of how you start seeing the theme in your life.
Yeah.
And so it takes time to like just reflect and to see how God was even moving in your life through all of this, to just pause. But I wonder for you, what do you have? Is there any way that you process, like you come to like start, like, man, you look back and you can pinpoint where maybe like, oh man, I now looking back, I can see that God was in that, or God was in this, or God was in that. Because I don't know if you have a process of that, but I think about it, I'm like, how do we come to those moments where we start to like identify maybe God's subtle movement either in us or around us?
Yeah, I think one thing that for me that I was able to see is how much of a reliance and how much, going back to like being comfortable, is like how much of that program and how much of establishment that I am really, that I really gravitate to, because I think that when it becomes part of just your weekly schedule that you're in church, I think that once it's taken away or when it gets really drastically changed, I think that it forces you to think like, okay, like, am I really going to church because I'm getting something out of it, or is this just another part of my routine at this point? So I think, and even now too, like online, like even though it is different, it's still regular.
Yeah.
So I think that it's definitely challenged that, because for me, like growing up, I was in church like 3 days out of the week, right? So that's a bit, and it's a big part of, when it's just a big part of your schedule, and if you don't really have a choice to say otherwise, I feel like you just kind of start taking it for granted. And I think that's what having it being not an option right now, I think it's made me value it a lot more.
That's a good that is interesting to think about, like when we notice or like how we respond to certain things that are disrupted.
Yeah.
Because for me, I have never like gotten real upset when like my workout routine was disrupted.
That's
I was
true.
like, oh, I can't go to the gym anymore. Like I was not sad about that or anything. But then to like notice the things that when they are disrupted, it really impacts me, and like why that is. Like, why am I so affected by certain things? Someone told me this really good advice, or maybe I read it or something, but they said, if you get hysterical, then it means it was historical. Meaning that like if you get triggered by something, then chances are that whatever triggered you is like some deep-rooted wound from the past. Like if you get hysterical, it means it's historical. And I just think that even like noticing our frustration points or noticing what brings us joy. All of that stuff, I think, is tied to like noticing how God is moving in our life, by what frustrates us, what, I don't know, makes us happy. So
that's true.
But I wonder what for you, I mean, what this year, what have you noticed about your life that, you know, or people who are viewing this, what have you noticed about your life? And the themes of maybe how God is working in your life. I don't even know what I'm trying to ask.
I think at first I thought it showed me more of how introverted that I actually am, because I was at first like kind of happy that there was no like social pressure to like be around people and like, I don't know, just be in situations where you have to have conversations with people. So I was happy about that. Like I actually was really happy about church online, because I was like, okay, like I don't have to try to talk to anyone after church. I can just retreat. But I think after a while, and I think what showed me that too was just how tired I got of Zoom, you know, being on Zoom with groups. And maybe that's just also because like that's how we do our meetings, and that's how we're doing our small group. So it's a lot of time on Zoom. But I definitely think that it kind of made me realize like that the people in my life that I was in regular community with, when that got taken away, it definitely like, I didn't realize that it would have as much of an impact as it did, because I thought that I would be okay. Yeah. But and this is coming from someone who isn't always up to like hang out and do stuff. Like I think it showed me that these communities that I choose to be a part of like are actually even more important than I thought. Because,
dude, that's so good.
You know.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, we had people who are introvert, like real deal introverts, not like it's trendy, cool to call yourself an introvert, right? It's like they're really introverts, and they have even started like missing the human interaction and being a part of, you know, the community that we have. Yeah. And, you know, I don't know, we'll get into this probably in another podcast, so we're not going to go too deep.
That's true.
But I just think, man, there's a lot of hurt happening right now. A lot of that is like made worse by the fact that we are isolated from each other, not connected. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And going back to what we started this with, this is partially why we're doing this podcast. We want it to make it feel like you are in the room with us, and 100%, that you're having a conversation with us. So, you know, we hope that this makes it, you know, invites you into the talks that we have. And I also think that it made me realize too, like, in the same way that learning to adapt to change, like trying to be okay with that. Yeah. Even though, you know, even if that's all that we have available to us, but not only just rethinking what is a group, but also rethinking like what is the function of church and what's the function of all these things that we were just so used to and that we took for granted. Because when it doesn't become viable option, and you have to learn how to rethink it, does it mean that it's not as good, or is it not as valid? Like I think a lot of that too was stuff that everyone's kind of wrestling with right now too.
No, I mean, and Mark, I just think in big picture faith journey, I just think we think that like we're supposed to like have this faith early on, and that faith is just this simple, straight line, sequential process for our entire lives. But I just do not think that is like the biblical pattern of faith. Yeah. I think it is this constant cycle of reconstructing and deconstructing. Yeah. Because that is just how it works when we come to like greater levels of intimacy with God. Mm-hmm. We cannot think that like what we understood about God as a child will sufficiently sustain us into adulthood. And not that those truths were not true, but the more that you mature and the more that you're, but anyways, just to not to even delve into that conversation, but just that this year was a reconstruction, deconstruction cycle that just happened in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. That a thought that I had, and I don't know where it was incepted into my mind. Like, I don't know if it's me regurgitating something that I've heard, but I just had this thought where it's like, what is considered faith for me is different than what is considered faith for someone else. Like, it's not in the same way where it's like, you know, it is for someone who has never grown up in church, never heard about Jesus, never, you know, the act of going to church, I think, is a step of faith.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
But at the same time, if you have grown up in church all your life, that's not it's not a big deal. You gone to church. So it's like, it's the same action, but there's so much more
Yeah.
that goes into it. So you can't look at it as these. I think a lot of times we tend to think of it as these milestones, which I do think are good, but I also do think like that it's always there's never the finish line where it's like because what is and then I think what's also hard is that there's this tendency to look down on or to minimize those steps of faith because to someone who has already achieved that, it's like, oh, what, you know, big deal. Someone shows up to church. You're supposed to go to church. Like, you get judged if you don't, you know, if you don't show up. And it's like, but that's, you don't know people's journey. Like, you don't know what it took for someone to take that step. So it's like, I think in the same way where it's like learning to rethink what that means, we're learning what it really means to deconstruct what we think of as following Jesus too.
Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think that it's part of every faith journey. And if it's not, like, to me, that's I don't want to say, I just think that it's not something we have to be afraid of. It's not something that we should fear. It's something that is part of the journey. It's part of where God is taking us, is to grow us. So Mark, let me ask you a few questions.
Okay.
What do we need help with in this podcast? We need we need a name.
We need a name.
Do we need a name? We don't know. Well, let's think about that because I don't know. Maybe we need a name.
Yeah, but what's also nice is that we already have podcasts on Spotify and Apple and Anchor and SoundCloud. So if you're listening, you can find us there. But we already, it falls under the because we already have like Eden Church on those platforms. So it's not like we're trying to title it from scratch because at the very, even if when we upload this, if we forget to title it, it'll already have
already have a title.
It's already going to show up. Okay. So, but I do think a name's important.
Okay, so we need a name, but we also need some help with creating some of the content in terms of direction. Like, what do people want to hear us wrestle with and talk through, or not even us? I mean, because we can bring other people in.
There have been some out there ideas. Like people were saying we should talk about aliens.
Mark, what do you believe about aliens?
It's a conspiracy theory. So I don't know if we should go down that road. I mean, we can open those.
I'm nervous. Maybe people will know more about us than we want them to know. But who cares, Mark?
My fear of what other people think about me is really going to get exposed, depending on how much I want to disclose about what I think about things. So
yeah, we're going to share we'll share some scars, but we're not going to bleed all over everybody.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, tune in at your own risk, ladies and gentlemen.
That's true.
So
prepare to have your conceived notions of us to be shattered. But
well, cool. Well, I'm pumped. This is episode 1. I feel like this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And thank all of you for jumping on and being a part of the conversation. But don't just allow for you listening to be the extent of your involvement. Feel free to comment. Let us know. We'll be reviewing all of that stuff.
At Eden the Church on social media. Or if you want to send us an email, hello@eden.church.
And then do they like these videos? How does that work?
Yeah, smash that like button, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you're always notified of any time we drop a new video. So on Sundays, we have our messages at eden.online.church. So make sure you tune in 9:30, 11 a.m. And then you can also watch the replays on our YouTube channel as well. But thank you so much for listening. This is our first episode.
Yep.
We did it.
Yep.
We're
2021. We're back.
We will see if we do another one of these.